For many years, Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy were more than famous actors. To people all around the world, they were the very meaning of comedy. When their faces appeared on the screen, audiences felt safe, happy, and ready to laugh. They did not need fast talking or clever jokes. Sometimes, they did not even need words. A slow walk, a confused look, or a quiet pause was enough to make people smile. Together, they created a kind of comedy that felt gentle and human. They were not heroes. They were not strong or brave or perfect. They were two simple men who tried their best and failed in funny ways. Because of this, people loved them deeply. Everyone believed their friendship was just as strong in real life as it was in their films. So when Oliver Hardy died in 1957, many people expected Stan Laurel to stand beside his friend one last time. Actors came, directors came, old friends came, fans waited. But Stan Laurel did not come. There were no flowers from him, no message for the newspapers, no explanation. People were confused and even upset. Some thought the two men had argued. Others believed their friendship had ended badly. A few said Stan was too proud or too cold to attend. But none of these things were true. The real reason was much quieter, much sadder, and far more human. To understand why Stan Laurel made this painful choice, we must go back to the beginning, long before fame, long before Hollywood, and long before he met Oliver Hardy. Stan Laurel was born in 1890 in a small town in England called Ulverston. His real name was Arthur Stanley Jefferson. He grew up in a family where the theater was a normal part of life. His father was an actor and theater manager. His mother was also an actress. Costumes, stage lights, and rehearsals were common things in his childhood. But even though his parents loved him, they were often away, traveling from town to perform. So, young Stan spent many of his early years living with his grandparents. Their home was quiet. There was no cheering crowd, no music from the stage, only slow days, simple meals, and long walks. In that quiet world, Stan learned how to be alone. He learned how to watch people carefully. He noticed how small movements could show big feelings. He noticed how silence could sometimes say more than words. These lessons stayed with him for the rest of his life. Near his home was a small wooden theater. It was not beautiful or rich, but to Stan it felt magical. He would stand nearby and watch his parents perform. He saw how people laughed, how they cried, and how stories could touch hearts. Slowly, without planning it, he fell in love with the stage. As a teenager, he began performing in small shows. He was shy, thin, and soft-spoken, but on stage, he found a way to express himself without needing to speak much. His comedy was gentle. He did not show off. He used his face, his body, and his timing. By the time he was 20 years old, he had joined a famous comedy group led by a man named Fred Carno. Another young performer in that group was Charlie Chaplin. Stan and Charlie traveled together, learning how to make people laugh using only movement and emotion. This was the beginning of Stan Laurel's long journey into film. When Stan moved to America, his life was not easy. He worked in many small films. Some failed, some were forgotten. He changed his name to Stan Laurel, hoping for better luck. He struggled with money, with relationships, and with confidence. He often felt unsure of himself. He did not think he was special. He did not think he would become famous. But then, slowly, something important happened. He met a large, warm-hearted actor named Oliver Hardy. At first, they worked together only by chance. They were placed in the same short films, playing small roles. But something about them felt right. Their styles were different, yet they fit together perfectly. Stan was nervous and childlike. Oliver was proud and serious. When Stan made mistakes, Oliver reacted with slow shock and quiet pain. Audiences loved this balance. Without trying to, they created magic. Over time, their friendship grew. They trusted each other. They defended each other. When film studios tried to separate them, Stan refused. He believed that their comedy only worked when they were together. Oliver felt the same. They became partners not only in work, but in life. They ate together, traveled together, laughed together, and when problems came, they faced them side by side. Stan, who had always felt lonely inside, finally felt safe with someone. Oliver became more than a coworker. He became family. This is why what happened in 1957 was so painful. When Oliver Hardy became sick, Stan Laurel wrote to him again and again. He worried constantly. He refused new work. He said there could be no comedy without Oliver. And when Oliver finally died, something inside Stan broke. He did not hate his friend. He did not forget him. He loved him too deeply. And that love is the true reason he stayed away from the funeral. As the years passed, Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy became more than famous partners on a screen. Their lives became deeply connected in a quiet and personal way that few people truly saw. To the public, they were always joking, falling over furniture, breaking doors, and getting into silly trouble. But behind the cameras, they were two very different men who leaned on each other to survive the hard parts of life. Oliver Hardy was friendly and warm. He loved food, music, and long conversations. He enjoyed being around people and making them feel welcome. Stan Laurel was the opposite. He was shy, nervous, and often worried too much. He did not like crowds. He did not enjoy attention when the cameras were off. Many nights, he stayed awake thinking about his work, his mistakes, and his fears. When things became too heavy in his mind, Oliver was usually the one who listened. He calmed him. He joked with him. He reminded him that he was not alone. This balance made their partnership strong. On screen, Oliver looked confident, while Stan looked unsure. In real life, Oliver gave strength, while Stan gave loyalty. Together, they felt complete. Their success grew quickly. Film after film was loved by audiences around the world. People in America, Europe, and beyond recognized their faces instantly. Children copied their walks. Adults quoted their scenes. Their comedy did not depend on language, so it crossed borders easily. Even during hard times like the Great Depression and World War II, their films brought comfort. When people were worried about money or safety, Laurel and Hardy gave them something gentle to hold on to. Laughter became a small escape from fear. And through all of this, Stan and Oliver stayed together. Studios changed. Technology changed from silent films to talking films. The world changed, but their partnership remained. However, time is something no one can escape. As the 1940s ended, both men were getting older. Their bodies were weaker. Long filming days became harder. Traveling became tiring. And slowly, Oliver Hardy's health began to fail. He gained a lot of weight, which made his heart work harder. He suffered from strokes that damaged his strength and his spirit. The proud man who once stood tall in front of cameras now needed help just to move across a room. For someone who had spent his life being watched, this was deeply painful. Oliver became quiet. He became sad. Sometimes he felt ashamed that people remembered him as strong, while he now felt weak. Stan Laurel watched this happen and felt helpless. He lived far away, but his heart stayed with his friend. He wrote letters often, sometimes short notes, sometimes long pages filled with worry and care. He asked about Oliver's pain. He asked if he was eating. He asked if he could sleep. He tried to send jokes to lift his spirit, but the jokes became fewer as Oliver's condition worsened. Stan refused to accept work offers. Film studios called him, offering money to make movies alone, or with new partners. He always said no. To him, comedy was not just work. It was something he shared with one person only. He said, "There can be no Laurel without Hardy." These words were not for newspapers. They were simply the truth of how he felt. In 1956, doctors told Oliver that his heart was very weak. They said he must rest completely or risk dying. He went on a strict diet. He lost a lot of weight quickly, but his body was already damaged. He became thinner, quieter, and more tired. Stan knew what these signs meant. He had spent his life watching people closely. He understood when something was ending. The thought of losing Oliver filled him with fear that he could not explain to others. It was not only the fear of losing a friend, it was the fear of losing the only person who truly understood him without words. When news came in August 1957 that Oliver Hardy had died, Stan Laurel was at home. He was 70 years old, weak himself, and living quietly. When he heard the news, he did not cry in public. He did not speak to reporters. He did not make announcements. He simply sat alone. The world expected him to attend the funeral. Newspapers waited for his picture. Fans expected to see the two famous faces together one last time. But Stan did not leave his house. He did not put on his suit. He did not travel. He stayed where he was, surrounded by silence. To many people, this looked strange. Some thought he was rude. Some believed he was angry. Others said he was selfish. But no one asked how a quiet man who had spent his whole life hiding his pain might face the greatest loss of all. After Oliver Hardy was laid to rest, questions followed Stan Laurel like shadows. Journalists wrote stories. Fans sent letters. People wanted to know why the greatest comedy partner in film history had not come to say goodbye. Stan did not answer at first. He did not defend himself. He did not argue. He had never liked explaining his heart to strangers. But slowly, in private letters and quiet conversations, the truth came out. And when people finally understood it, many wished they had never judged him. Stan Laurel said that he could not go to the funeral because he could not bear to see Oliver that way. He did not want to remember his friend as a still body in a box. He did not want his last image of Oliver to be cold and silent. For Stan, Oliver was not a man who died in a hospital bed. He was the man who laughed loudly on set, the man who wiped sweat from his face between scenes, the man who teased him gently when he was nervous, the man who stood beside him when the world laughed. Stan said that he wanted to keep Oliver alive in his memory the way he truly was, full of movement, sound, and life. He believed that if he went to the funeral, that living picture would be replaced by something dark and painful that he could never remove from his mind. To many people this may sound simple, but to Stan Laurel, memory was everything. His comedy had always been built on small moments, quiet expressions, and feelings that could not be spoken. He lived inside his thoughts more than in the outside world. Losing Oliver was not just losing a friend. It was losing the part of himself that felt safe. It was losing the only person who had shared his strange rhythm of silence and timing. So he chose to protect the last good image he had, even if others misunderstood him for it. After Oliver's death, Stan Laurel never returned to film. He never looked for another partner. He never tried to create the same magic again. He answered letters from fans, often writing kind words and thanking them for loving their films. Sometimes he shared small stories about Oliver, always gentle, always respectful. But he did not perform. He did not step back into the world of laughter. In many ways, his life became very quiet, much like his childhood had been. He lived for almost 8 more years after Oliver died. During that time, he spent most days alone, thinking, writing, and remembering. When people asked him about his career, he did not speak about awards, or money, or fame. He spoke about moments, he spoke about timing, and sometimes, softly, he spoke about Oliver. Once, when someone asked him if he missed his partner, Stan simply said, "It was all fun, but it was never the same without him." Those words carried more truth than any long speech could. When Stan Laurel finally died in 1965, many people felt that an entire chapter of comedy had closed forever. Two men who had made the world laugh without cruelty, without anger, and without noise, were finally together again, at least in memory. Their films remained, their faces remained. Their quiet kindness remained on screens long after their voices had faded. Stan Laurel did not attend Oliver Hardy's funeral, not because he lacked love, but because his love was too deep to face the final image of loss. He chose memory over reality. He chose warmth over cold stone. He chose to remember his friend as he had always been, alive beside him, waiting for the next scene to begin. On August 7, 1957, Oliver Hardy died quietly in North Hollywood. For more than 30 years, his face had been known all over the world. People knew his slow walk, his tired smile, and the gentle way he looked at the camera when something went wrong. For millions, he was not just a movie star. He was comfort. He was laughter during hard times. When the news of his death spread, fans felt as if they had lost someone close to them. A few days later, his funeral was held. Friends came, family came, old co-workers came. But one name was missing from the list of people who attended. Stan Laurel, his partner, his other half, the thin man to Hardy's heavy one, the nervous face to Hardy's calm one. The two men who had built one of the greatest comedy teams in history were known as a single idea, Laurel and Hardy. They were never spoken of separately. So, when Stan Laurel did not appear at the funeral, people noticed right away. Newspapers mentioned it. Fans talked about it. Some people were shocked. Some were angry. A few even felt hurt. How could a man who shared so much time, so many films, and so many memories with Hardy stay away on the final day? Stories began to grow. Some said Laurel was proud. Some said he was angry. Others said the two men had secretly hated each other near the end. Over time, the truth became buried under guesses and rumors. But the real story was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet. It was slow. And it began many years earlier, when two men who made the world laugh slowly started to grow old and tired. Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy did not begin as a famous team. They were just two actors working in silent films during the 1920s. Many comedians worked in those days. Studios made short films quickly and cheaply. Actors came and went. Most were forgotten. But something was different when Laurel and Hardy stood next to each other. They did not need fast jokes or wild movement. Their comedy was slow. It was built on small looks, long pauses, and tiny mistakes that became big problems. A director named Leo McCarey noticed this. He saw that their bodies moved in a similar way, that their timing matched, and that they seemed to understand each other without speaking. He helped shape their style. Instead of rushing, they waited. Instead of shouting, they stayed calm. This made their comedy feel real, like two ordinary men facing small troubles that slowly became disasters. Audiences loved it. The studio loved it. Soon, Laurel and Hardy were always together on screen. Behind the camera, Stan Laurel worked even harder. He rewrote scenes, changed jokes, and helped plan how each moment should look. He cared deeply about every detail. Hardy trusted him. Hardy focused on the hard physical work, the falling, the slipping, the heavy costumes, the long days. For many years their system worked. They made film after film. They became famous around the world. But time changes everything. By the late 1930s, problems with contracts and studios began to hurt their partnership. Laurel was fired for a time, while Hardy stayed. Even when they reunited, something had shifted. Later, they moved to bigger studios where they had less control. They still made money, but they were no longer happy. Their bodies were tired. Their hearts were tired too. They slowly stepped away from movies and returned to the stage in Europe, where fans still loved them deeply. But illness was already walking quietly beside them, waiting for the right moment to take its turn. By the early 1950s, both men were clearly struggling. Decades of falls, heavy meals, smoking, and stress had damaged their health. Their final movie, That's All K, was difficult to make. The production was confused. People spoke different languages. The weather was bad. Their bodies were weak. Laurel was in pain. Hardy had heart problems. The film failed, and their movie careers ended not with a celebration, but with silence. They returned home and rested. For a short time, they tried to perform on stage again. Fans welcomed them like heroes, especially in Europe. In Ireland, crowds filled the harbor to see them arrive. Church bells rang their theme music. Both men cried. It was one of the last moments when they truly felt the love of the world together. Their final stage show came in 1954. There was no big goodbye, no speech. They simply stopped. Soon after, Hardy's health fell apart. He suffered a heart attack. Doctors warned him to change his life. He tried. He lost weight very quickly, far too quickly. Over 100 pounds disappeared from his body. Friends barely recognized him. He was weak. Some believed he had cancer, though this was never fully proven. What was clear was that he was not getting better. Years of smoking had hurt his lungs and heart. In 1956, he suffered a major stroke. He could no longer speak clearly. He could barely move. He stayed in bed at home while his wife cared for him. His money slowly vanished as medical bills grew. The man who once filled theaters now worried about paying for treatment. Stan Laurel wrote him letters. He wanted to visit, but his own health was poor. He had painful medical problems and could not travel easily. Still, he followed every update. He knew what was coming, even if no one said it out loud. In August 1957, Hardy suffered more strokes. He fell into a coma and died at the age of 65. The world remembered him as the big man who frowned at the camera when things went wrong. Newspapers wrote about his films. Old clips played again on television. Then came the funeral. And then came the questions. Why was Laurel not there? The rumors returned stronger than ever. Some writers tried to turn it into drama. They spoke of broken friendships and secret anger. But the truth was much simpler and much sadder. Laurel was sick, very sick. He could barely walk. Doctors had warned him not to travel. His body was weak from years of illness and pain. Going to the funeral was not possible. His wife and daughter went in his place. When people asked him why he was not there, he did not give a long answer. He simply said, "Babe would understand." That was all. To Laurel, their friendship did not live in a public moment. It lived in shared work, shared silence, shared struggle, and shared time. A funeral could not add to that, and it could not take anything away. After Hardy's death, something inside Stan Laurel closed forever. He refused to perform again. Studios called. Producers offered money. Fans asked for one last show. He said no to all of it. Not because he was angry, but because he felt the act no longer existed. Laurel and Hardy was not a job to him. It was a single body made of two people. Without Hardy, there was nothing to return to. Laurel spent his remaining years quietly. He lived simply. He wrote letters to fans, answering them himself. Young comedians visited him, not to see him perform, but to thank him. Jerry Lewis, Dick Van Dyke, Peter Sellers, Johnny Carson. They came to sit with him, to listen, to learn. Laurel shared stories and small jokes. Sometimes he helped write comedy for others, but he never stepped in front of a camera again. His heart belonged to a time that was gone. In 1965, Laurel suffered a heart attack. A few days later, he died in his chair at home. Before he passed, he made a small joke to his nurse about wanting to go skiing, even though he had never skied in his life. It was a soft joke, a simple joke, the kind he always loved. And that was how his life ended, not loudly, not with drama, but with quiet humor. Today, Laurel and Hardy's films still exist. Most of them have survived. People still watch them. Children laugh at the slow walks and the falling hats. Adults notice the sadness under the comedy, the patience, the kindness, the friendship. The story of the funeral remains part of their legend, but now we know the truth. Stan Laurel did not stay away because he did not care. He stayed away because his body could not carry him there, and because his heart was already broken. Their partnership did not end in anger. It ended in silence, in illness, and in time. Two men who spent their lives pretending to fail at everything had, in truth, succeeded at one rare thing: trust. And that trust lasted longer than fame, longer than money, and even longer than life itself.